Actually, it all started with Bitcoin, okay? And Bitcoin was, let's say, the Bitcoin white paper was published in 2009 or late 2008. But anyways, the first like transaction was in early 2009. And so blockchain is the technology that underpins Bitcoin. So it wasn't like the inventor of blockchain came up with an idea, I need to have this technology. He had, or she, or maybe was an entity, because that's also an interesting story. We don't know who the inventor was. Had a problem to solve, and then they created blockchain as a solution to solve that problem. And what the creator were trying to do was to create electronic cash. That is what Bitcoin is.
So the fundamental, when you say, I mean, the fundamental thing in my view of cash is really the exchange, right? What you're doing is you're stopping, or you're moving from a barter system where I give you a chicken and you give me eggs. Maybe that would not be the best trade, but what you're doing basically is you're now exchanging the chicken for cash. And doing it electronically is what Bitcoin is, kind of the use case of Bitcoin. But as far as the technology goes, for me, it's still Bitcoin. When I understand it, it's really the key thing about it is really this distributed ledger approach, right? And the synchronization and the encryption of the information. Because digital cash per se, I think, existed already before crypto or before Bitcoin.
And that's one of the misconceptions that we need to correct. One big source of confusion is that people mix up in their minds cash with payments. So a lot of the good stuff that we have is payments. That has nothing to do with it. It's different from cash. Payments is become very simple, super efficient. I mean, I use my phone. I don't even need to pull out my debit card anymore. I can just tap my phone. But it is not cash. That is payment systems. So sometimes people say, why do we need CBDC? Why do we need these like alternative forms of payments? Because they're not alternative forms of payments. They're alternative forms of cash. And cash is different. So the reason why it didn't exist before, it is because it was impossible to give this electronic version the same attributes of the physical version, which is, for example, instantaneous settlement, finality. I give you my note and it's yours. Unless I chase you, I try to get it back. I mean, it's done. We are done. We don't need to wait like settlements. And then it's also anonymous, which is very powerful. And these are ramifications for, like, if we want to get into that space and talk about society. But so it was impossible to do it electronically because you would always leave a trail which would allow to be identified, or maybe the settlement wasn't instantaneous. I mean, the things I've just described, like being anonymous, being settled instantaneously, can be seen as positive attributes or negative attributes, depending on the context. If you're fighting organized crime, being anonymous is not like a positive attribute of cash. If you live in a society where like there is like less restrictions on liberties, then you understand that, well, actually, if we only have payments, we don't have cash anymore, and I'm cut off the payment systems, I can be no longer a functioning member of society. So it is important that actually I can fall back to cash. And instead of using my cards, I can use like notes, and I can pay with notes.
So what you're saying is that digital or electronic cash or payment systems are completely dependent on the centralized structures of the banking system that currently has been built over many years. And that banking system is something which is highly regulated, highly controlled, and could be shut off. So it's basically, it's not cash in a sense that you own that cash. You're always dependent on that payment system being run by a third party. and I'm just trying to paraphrase to make sure I understand, is that Bitcoin to some degree has now created a situation where you and I can transact, but not with a piece of paper, but with a piece of electric cash or a piece of digital data, basically. And there, that allows us to move value or exchange goods without having to use the banking system. And that's that loss of control. And that's, I guess, where a lot of the stigma comes from, or a lot of the resistance also from governments and central banks, because they are losing control of the money system to some degree.
Exactly. That is what I believe spurred the central banks to action, because they saw it as a potential threat, and they thought, well, okay, we need to understand that space, we need to understand what is going on, because people trust. It's a matter of trust. They trust the money that is printed by the central bank to always be accepted, always being redeemable. And that if people started trusting a different form of cash, then of course that creates a big problem for governments and sovereign states.
And one of the questions that always comes is, how can I trust a system that I actually don't know how it works? And I sometimes then have to smile internally, at least, because most people don't understand how the fractional reserve banking system works either, and how those IT systems work either. So it's a false pretense to say that we actually know how things work in the existing infrastructure. It's just that, like you said, we've gotten used to it over many years, and we now trust it. And there's been for many years a high level of trust, and rightfully so, in most of our governments. I mean, in Switzerland, I think it's justified to have a high level of trust in your government. However, history also teaches you that over time things can change, and so that trust could also be disappointed at some point.